They told her to get on the ground. They told her she was nobody. They were wrong. Layla simply wanted to get home to her son. She was a nurse, a mother, and a law-abiding citizen. But to Officer Trent Carver, she was just another target on a lonely stretch of highway. An easy mark for a power trip. He thought he had all the leverage. He thought the badge made him a god. But when he threatened to take her child, Layla didn't scream. She didn't fight. She made one terrifyingly calm phone call. She didn't call a lawyer. She called her brother. And Officer Carver was about to learn that there are predators in this world far more dangerous than a corrupt cop with a gun. The rain in Oak Creek didn't wash things clean. It just made the grime slicker. Layla Brooks gripped the steering wheel of her older Honda Civic, her knuckles white against the fabric of her nursing uniform. Her shoulders burned with that deep, bone-weary ache that only comes from long hours of turning heavy patients and standing on unforgiving hospital tile. All she could think about was Kai. Her 6-year-old son was waiting at the babysitter's house, probably asleep on the couch with his thumb in his mouth. If she didn't get there soon, the babysitter would charge extra, and Layla didn't have it this week. She checked her speedometer, right at the limit. Perfect. She was invisible. She had to be. Then the world turned blue. The lights exploded in her rearview mirror, blindingly bright, bouncing off the wet asphalt and fracturing through the raindrops on her windshield. The siren didn't wail. It just gave a short, aggressive whoop-whoop that made her heart hammer against her ribs like a trapped bird. "No," Layla whispered, the word escaping as a breath of condensation. "Please God, no, not tonight." She pulled over slowly, easing the Civic onto the gravel shoulder near the old textile factory. It was a dead zone, no streetlights, just the looming skeleton of the abandoned building and the rhythmic swish-swish of her wipers. She did everything right. She put the car in park. She turned on the interior dome light. She rolled down the window despite the freezing drizzle. She placed both hands at the 10 and 2 positions on the wheel and spread her fingers wide. She watched the side mirror. 2 shadows detached themselves from the patrol car. One stayed back near the cruiser's trunk, the backup. The other approached with a swagger that made Layla's stomach turn. He had a flashlight beam that cut through the darkness, aimed directly into her eyes, blinding her. "License and registration," a voice barked. "No, good evening, no ma'am, just a command." Layla squinted against the glare. "It's in my glove box, officer. I'm going to reach for it now." "Don't tell me what you're going to do. Just do it slowly." Layla moved with agonizing slowness. She retrieved the documents and held them out the window. The flashlight didn't waver from her face. As the officer snatched the papers, the beam finally dropped, illuminating his name tag, T. Carver. Officer Trent Carver looked like he had been carved out of granite and bad intentions. Thick-necked, with a buzz cut a week overdue, and eyes bored by his own cruelty. He wasn't looking at her license. He was scanning the backseat of her car. "Rough night, Miss Brooks." He glanced at the ID. "I'm a nurse, officer. I'm coming off a double shift at the VA hospital. I'm just trying to pick up my son." "The VA, huh?" Carver scoffed, leaning his forearms on her doorframe and invading her space. The smell of stale coffee and wintergreen tobacco hit her. "You swerved back there, crossed the yellow line." "I didn't," Layla said, her voice trembling slightly. "I've been under the limit the whole way." "Are you calling me a liar, Miss Brooks?" The temperature in the car seemed to drop 10 degrees. "No, officer. I'm just saying I was being careful." "Careful people usually have something to hide." Carver shone the light into the back seat again. "You got anything in here I should know about? Weapons? Drugs?" "No, just my son's car seat and some groceries." Carver stepped back, tapping his flashlight against his palm. He looked back at his partner, a younger man who looked nervous, shifting his weight from foot to foot. Carver smirked. "Step out of the vehicle, Miss Brooks." Layla froze. "Why? I gave you my license. The car is clear." "I smell marijuana," Carver lied. He said it with the casual ease of a man who had said it 1,000 times before. "Probable cause. Step out now." Layla knew the script. She knew that arguing would only make it worse. But the injustice of it, the sheer, fabricated weight of it, clogged her throat. She wasn't smoking. She had never smoked in her life. She was a mother trying to survive. "Officer, please. My son is waiting. I'm tired. I haven't done anything." Carver's hand dropped to his holster. He didn't unsnap it, but the threat was loud and clear. "I'm not going to ask you again. Get out of the car, or I will drag you out." Layla unbuckled her seatbelt. Her hands were shaking so hard she could barely find the latch. She opened the door and stepped into the rain. The water soaked through her scrubs instantly, chilling her to the bone. "Hands on the hood," Carver commanded. "Spread your legs." As Layla leaned over the cold metal of her own car, rain plastering her hair to her face, she saw the flashing lights reflecting in the puddles. She felt small. She felt helpless. But as Carver's hands patted her down, rougher than necessary, lingering too long near her waist, Layla's fear began to harden into something else, something cold and sharp. She remembered who she was, and more importantly, she remembered who she was related to. "Clear," Carver muttered, sounding almost disappointed he hadn't found a weapon on her person. He shoved her slightly, pinning her hip against the side mirror. "Stand there. Don't move." Layla shivered, hugging herself against the cold. "Officer, can I please stand under the overhang? It's freezing." "You'll stand where I tell you to stand," Carver snapped. He turned to his partner. "Riley, toss the car." Officer Finn Riley, the rookie, hesitated. He was pale with a baby face that looked out of place under the brim of his hat. He glanced at Layla, his eyes darting away in shame. "Carver, she's a nurse. The car's clean. I didn't smell anything." Carver spun around, his face inches from Riley's. "Did I ask for your opinion, Boot? I said I smell it. That means we smell it. Now search the damn car before I write you up for insubordination." Riley swallowed hard, mumbled, "Yes, sir," and ducked into the driver's side of the Civic. Layla watched as he rummaged through her life. He pulled out the glove box contents, napkins, old receipts, a tire pressure gauge, and dumped them on the passenger seat. He reached into the back, tossing Kai's backpack onto the wet floorboard. "Hey!" Layla shouted instinctively. "That's my son's homework." "Quiet!" Carver roared. He stepped closer to her, looming. "You're making a scene, Brooks. You resisting?" "I'm not resisting," she said through gritted teeth. "I'm watching you destroy my property for no reason." "I think you're high," Carver said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I think you're high, and you're driving around this town, endangering decent people. I think I need to take you in for a blood test. That's a DUI, Layla. You know what happens then." He paused for effect. "You lose your nursing license." He smiled, a predator showing teeth. "And then you lose the kid." The world stopped. The rain, the lights, the cold. It all vanished. All Layla heard was the threat against Kai. "You lose the kid." "You can't do that," she whispered. "Watch me," Carver said. "I can call CPS right now. Emergency removal. Tell them I found an erratic driver, suspected narcotics, uncooperative. They'll put little, what's his name, Kai in a foster home tonight. Maybe a nice group home." Layla's vision tunneled. This wasn't a traffic stop anymore. This was an abduction under color of law. Carver was enjoying this. He was feeding on her terror. He wanted her to beg, to cry, maybe even to lash out, so he would have an excuse to use the baton hanging from his belt. She took a deep breath, forcing her heart rate to slow. She had seen trauma before. She worked in the ER and the VA. She dealt with men who had seen the worst of humanity. She knew that panic was a death sentence. "Officer Carver," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "I would like to make a phone call." Carver threw his head back and laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound. "A phone call? You think this is the movies? You don't get a phone call until you're booked." "I need to call someone to pick up my son," Layla lied. "If you take me in, someone has to get him. Or do you want to explain to your captain why a 6-year-old was left abandoned at a babysitter's house because of your stop?" Carver stopped laughing. He calculated. Abandoning a kid was bad paperwork. "Make it quick," he spat. "But if you call a lawyer, I snatch the phone and we go straight to the station. You call a babysitter, that's it." Layla reached into her scrub pocket with trembling fingers and pulled out her cracked iPhone. She didn't scroll to the babysitter. She didn't scroll to a lawyer. She went to her favorites. There was only one contact there: Big Brother. She pressed dial. She put the phone to her ear, praying. "Please pick up. Please, Zeke, pick up." It rang once, twice. Carver was watching her, tapping his foot impatiently. "Tick-tock, mama." On the third ring, the line clicked open. The voice on the other end wasn't groggy. It was crisp, alert, and dangerously calm. It was a voice that commanded rooms just by whispering. "Nia, Zeke," she said, using his childhood nickname, her voice finally breaking. "I need you." "Are you hurt?" The shift in his tone was immediate. The warmth vanished, replaced by a metallic, intense focus. "No, not yet. I'm on Route 9 near the old textile factory. A cop, Officer Carver, he pulled me over. He's tearing my car apart. He says he's going to take me in for DUI. He planted something, Zeke, or he's going to. He threatened to take Kai." There was a silence on the other end of the line. A silence so heavy, it felt like the air pressure dropped. "Is he there right now?" "He's standing right in front of me." "Put him on speaker." Layla lowered the phone. "Officer, my brother wants to speak to you." Carver rolled his eyes. "Oh, for God's sake, give me that." He snatched the phone from her hand. He didn't put it on speaker. He put it to his ear, a smirk playing on his lips. "Listen here, buddy," Carver said, puffing his chest out. "I don't know who you think you are, but your sister is in a lot of trouble, so unless you're the police commissioner, I suggest you shut your mouth." And Carver stopped. Layla watched his face. The smirk didn't just fade, it evaporated. His eyebrows knitted together in confusion, then rose in shock. He pulled the phone away from his ear for a second, staring at it as if it had burned him, then slowly put it back. "Who is this?" Carver asked, his voice losing its swagger. He listened for another moment. Layla saw Officer Riley pop his head out of her car, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. Carver's face turned a shade of gray that looked unhealthy even in the blue strobe lights. He swallowed hard. "Look, pal, I don't care what unit you say you're with. This is my jurisdiction. You threaten me again and I'll—" Carver suddenly flinched as if the voice on the other end had physically slapped him. "Okay," Carver stammered. "Okay, you'll listen to me." The call cut off. Carver stared at the black screen of the phone. He looked at Layla. There was fear in his eyes now, but it was masked by anger. He shoved the phone back into her chest. "Your brother," Carver hissed, leaning in close, his spittle hitting her cheek, "has a big mouth. He thinks he can scare me. He thinks he can play soldier." Carver grabbed his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 4 Alpha. I have a non-compliant suspect requesting a supervisor and a K-9 unit. Prepare for transport." He glared at Layla. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life. Nobody talks to me like that. Nobody." Layla clutched her phone. She didn't know exactly what Zeke had said, but she knew her brother. Zane Zeke Brooks didn't make threats. He made promises, and somewhere in the dark, she knew he was coming. The click of the handcuffs was the loudest sound in the world. It wasn't a clean mechanical sound like in the movies. It was a gritty, pinching noise of metal biting into skin. Officer Carver didn't bother to be gentle. He grabbed Layla's wrists and wrenched them behind her back, twisting her shoulders until the rotator cuffs screamed in protest. The cold steel ratcheted tight against her ulna bone, pinching the delicate skin of her wrist. "You're making a mistake," Layla gasped, her cheek pressed against the wet trunk of her Civic. The rain was coming down harder now, mixing with the tears she refused to let fall. "Please, just check my bag properly. Just look at my ID again." "You lost your chance to talk when you handed the phone to your boyfriend," Carver grunted, tightening the left cuff one notch too far on purpose. "And don't tell me that was your brother. I know a thug threat when I hear one." He spun her around. Layla stumbled, losing her footing on the slick gravel. Carver caught her by the upper arm, his fingers digging into her bicep, and marched her toward his patrol car. To Layla, the cruiser looked like a shark wading in the dark water. The back door was already open. The interior was a hard plastic shell designed to be hosed down. It smelled of industrial disinfectant, stale sweat, and the lingering copper scent of old violence. "Get in," Carver ordered, shoving her head down. Layla crawled into the back seat. It was humiliating. With her hands cuffed behind her, she had no balance. She had to slide across the hard plastic seat, her legs awkwardly shuffling. As Carver slammed the door, the sound sealed her in. The air inside was stiflingly hot, the heater blasting at full force, suffocating her. She was trapped. Through the plexiglass divider and the wire mesh, she watched Carver standing in the rain. He was pacing. His swagger had transformed into a jagged, nervous energy. He kept looking at his watch, then out into the darkness of the highway, then back at his partner, Riley. Riley was standing by the Civic, looking miserable. He had stopped searching the car. He was just standing there, rain dripping off the brim of his hat, looking at Layla in the back of the cruiser. Their eyes met for a second, Layla's pleading, Riley's filled with a cowardly apology, before he looked away, kicking at a loose stone. Inside the cruiser, the police radio crackled with static bursts of jargon. Carver grabbed the mic on his shoulder, his knuckles white. "Dispatch, I need a unit sooner than that. I have a volatile situation here. Suspect has made threats involving third parties." The radio stayed silent. All units were tied up. Carver cursed and kicked the tire of his own cruiser. The thud vibrated through the chassis, shaking Layla. He was unraveling. The phone call had gotten under his skin deeper than he wanted to admit. He pulled a pack of cigarettes from his pocket, shielding it from the rain, and lit one with shaking hands. The cherry of the cigarette glowed angry red in the dark. Layla closed her eyes and leaned her head against the window. The vibration of the engine hummed against her skull. She tried to focus on her breathing. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. It was a technique Zeke had taught her years ago, back when he was just her big brother and not a ghost in the military machine. Carver thought he was a thug, a gangbanger making empty threats. Layla almost laughed, a hysterical bubble rising in her chest. Carver had no idea. He didn't know about the medals Zeke kept in a shoebox because he didn't like looking at them. He didn't know about the scars that mapped his back, like a jagged atlas of war zones most Americans couldn't find on a globe. He didn't know that Zeke didn't belong to the Army anymore. Not really. He belonged to a unit that officially didn't exist, a Tier 1 asset group that operated in the shadows where the rules of regular law enforcement didn't apply. She remembered the last time she saw him at a family gathering. He had been quiet, carving the turkey with surgical precision. He looked tired, not sleepy tired, but soul tired. He had told her, "Layla, I spend my life hunting monsters. It's hard to come back and pretend the world is safe." Now a monster had found her. Time dragged on. The rain turned into a deluge, hammering the roof of the car like 1,000 tiny fists. The isolation was absolute, just the dark highway and the two cops standing in the floodlights. Suddenly, Carver stopped pacing. He dropped his cigarette into a puddle. He tilted his head, listening. Layla opened her eyes. She couldn't hear anything over the rain and the heater, but she saw Carver reach for his holster, unsnapping the retention strap. He walked toward the center of the road, peering into the black void beyond the textile factory. Officer Riley looked up, startled. "Sarge, what is it?" "Shut up," Carver hissed. "Listen." Then Layla heard it. Or rather, she felt it. It wasn't a siren. It wasn't the roar of an engine. It was a low-frequency thrumming, a rhythmic thup-thup that vibrated in her chest cavity. It was coming from above, but there were no lights in the sky. Carver unholstered his weapon. "Dispatch, this is 4 Alpha. I have an aircraft. Low altitude. No lights. Unidentified. Do you have traffic in my sector?" The radio remained silent, not just quiet, dead. The static was gone. "Dispatch," Carver shouted. Nothing. The lights on the dashboard of the cruiser flickered. The heater died. The laptop mount, usually glowing with data, went black. The engine sputtered and cut out. Darkness swallowed them. The only light came from Carver's flashlight, the beam cutting frantically through the rain. "Riley, get to the car," Carver yelled, backing up toward the cruiser. "Radio is dead. My car just died." "Mine too!" Riley screamed from the Civic, where the headlights had just extinguished. They were alone in the dark on a deserted stretch of road, with the sound of the invisible chopper getting louder, pressing down on them like a physical weight. And then, on the road ahead where the darkness was deepest, 3 pairs of headlights ignited simultaneously. They were blindingly bright, high-intensity LEDs that cut through the rain like lasers. They didn't flicker. They didn't waver. 3 black SUVs were sitting across the road, blocking both lanes. They hadn't made a sound approaching. They were just there. Officer Trent Carver had been a cop for over a decade. He had been in bar fights, high-speed chases, and 1 shootout. He considered himself a predator. He was the one who knocked on the door. He was the one who held the power. But as he stared at the wall of white light blocking the road, Trent Carver felt a primal sensation he hadn't felt since he was a child afraid of the basement. He felt like prey. "Who is that?" Riley squeaked, drawing his gun but holding it like it was a poisonous snake. "State troopers. Feds," Carver said, his voice trembling. He shielded his eyes against the glare. "That's not the feds." The doors of the SUVs opened in unison. There was no shouting, no police, "Get down," no chaotic scrambling. The movement was fluid, synchronized, and terrifyingly silent. 6 figures stepped out. They were dressed in tactical gear, but not the blue polyester of the local SWAT team. They wore multicam black, a camouflage pattern designed for night operations. They wore high-cut ballistic helmets with quad-lens night vision goggles, flipped up like insect eyes. They carried rifles that looked short, suppressed, and expensive. They moved in a phalanx, spreading out across the wet asphalt with the ease of water flowing over rock. They didn't point their weapons at the officers. They held them at the low ready, a posture that suggested they didn't need to aim to kill. They just needed to decide to. Carver raised his flashlight, trying to find a face, a badge, anything to anchor him back to his authority. "Identify yourselves. This is an active crime scene. I am a police officer." The lead figure didn't stop. He walked straight down the center line, ignoring the rain, ignoring Carver's gun, ignoring the shouting. He was a mountain of a man, broad-shouldered and moving with kinetic lethality. He stopped 10 feet from Carver. The man wasn't wearing a helmet. He was bareheaded, the rain soaking his short, dark hair. He wore a tactical vest over a dark gray thermal shirt. His face was hard, angular, composed of sharp planes and shadows. His eyes were dark, intelligent, and utterly devoid of mercy. It was the face Layla had seen in family photos for 30 years. But it wasn't the brother who cracked jokes at barbecues. This was Zeke. This was the commander. Zane, Zeke. Brooks looked at Carver. He didn't look at the gun in Carver's hand. He looked directly into his pupils. "You're holding a weapon in the presence of a superior officer," Zeke said. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the sound of the rain and the idling SUVs like a razor blade. "I suggest you reholster it before my team perceives you as a threat." Carver blinked, sweat mixing with rain on his forehead. "Superior officer? I'm Oak Creek Police. You have no jurisdiction here. Who are you?" Zeke took one step closer. The distance between them was now intimate, dangerous. "My name is Lieutenant Colonel Zane Brooks," he said, the rank landing like a hammer blow. "You have my sister in the back of that car." Carver's heart stuttered. The brother, the voice on the phone. But this wasn't what he expected. He expected a gang member. He expected a loudmouth. He didn't expect a Tier 1 operator with a fire team of ghosts behind him. She's a suspect," Carver stammered, his bravado crumbling like wet sand. "DUI, possession. I have probable cause." "You have nothing," Zeke said. He didn't shout. He stated it as a fact of physics. "I know my sister. She doesn't drink. She doesn't smoke. And she certainly doesn't cross yellow lines unless she's dodging a pothole." Zeke turned his head slightly, looking past Carver to the cruiser. He saw Layla's silhouette in the back, her head bowed. A muscle in his jaw jumped, the only sign of the rage boiling beneath his disciplined exterior. "Riley," Zeke barked, not looking at the rookie.
He said he smelled marijuana. I've never smoked marijuana in my life. He said I was aggressive. I had my hands on the steering wheel. I said yes, sir, and no, sir, the whole time. He reached under my seat and pulled out a bag. I had never seen it before. I lost my job, couldn't pass background checks anymore. Nobody would hire me. I spent in prison for drugs that were never mine. My kids were put in foster care. By the time I got out, my ex-wife had full custody. I barely see them now. One by one, the victims came forward. Men and women who had spent years trying to tell anyone who would listen that the system had failed them, that Cade Langley was not who he pretended to be. For years, no one believed them. Their complaints were dismissed. Their appeals were denied. Their lives were destroyed. Now someone was finally listening. But the FBI needed more than just victim testimony. They needed someone from inside. Someone who could describe what they had witnessed firsthand. They needed Nadia Reyes. She was brought in. Agent Sienna Brooks met her in a small gray room with no windows. A recorder sat on the table between them. "Deputy Reyes, thank you for coming in." Reyes's hands were trembling. She hadn't slept in days. "Do I need a lawyer?" "That depends on what you tell me." Brooks opened a folder. "You were present during the traffic stop of Area Vaughn. Your body camera footage from that stop is listed as corrupted. Your dash cam footage was deleted from your department computer." She looked up. "But you didn't delete it from the cloud." The color drained from Reyes's face. "We've recovered that footage, Deputy. We've analyzed it frame by frame." Brooks pushed a photograph across the table. A still image from the dash cam. Langley's hand clearly visible, reaching into his pocket. You saw this happen. You saw him plant evidence. Silence. I have 2 kids, Reyes finally said. Her voice cracked. A mortgage. Cade has friends everywhere. His brother-in-law is a county commissioner. What was I supposed to do? You were supposed to be a peace officer. You took an oath to protect people. I know. Tears were streaming down Reyes's face now. I know. I know. How many times did you see him do it? Plant evidence? Falsify reports? Target people because of how they looked? Reyes closed her eyes. I don't know. Times? Maybe more. He would tell me to turn off my camera. He would say, watch how it's done. And I watched. She took a shaky breath. I should have spoken up. I didn't. I was scared. You have a choice now, Deputy. Cooperate fully. Tell us everything you witnessed, and there's a path forward for you. Stay silent, and you're looking at accessory charges. Obstruction of justice. Conspiracy. You'll never wear a badge again, and you might spend time in a cell of your own. Nadia Reyes made her choice. She told them everything, every stop she had witnessed, every equipment malfunction she had been told to create, every complaint she had heard dismissed without investigation. She told them about Sheriff Brooks, who signed off on reports without reading them, about the Internal Affairs Department run by Brooks's nephew, designed to protect officers rather than investigate them, about the culture of the department, where complaints from Black and Latino citizens were treated as inconveniences to be managed rather than problems to be solved. And she told them about the other deputies, the ones who knew something was wrong but said nothing, the ones who looked the other way because it was easier, the ones who had convinced themselves that what Cade Langley did wasn't their responsibility. When she was finished, Brooks turned off the recorder. You did the right thing, Brooks said. It should have happened sooner, but it happened. Will that matter? Brooks considered the question carefully. I don't know, but it's a start. Sheriff Harlan Brooks held a press conference. He stood at a podium outside the sheriff's department, cameras flashing, microphones thrust toward his face. The Whitmore County Sheriff's Department takes these allegations very seriously. He read from prepared notes. Deputy Langley has been suspended pending a thorough investigation. I want to assure the citizens of this county that we hold our officers to the highest standards. A reporter from the state paper interrupted. Sheriff Brooks, your signature appears on the dismissal forms for complaints filed against Deputy Langley. How can you claim to know nothing about his behavior? Brooks's face tightened. I trusted my internal affairs team to conduct thorough investigations. Your internal affairs team consists of one person, your nephew, who has no investigative training and has never sustained a single complaint against any officer. Is that the highest standards you mentioned? Brooks had no answer. The press conference ended shortly after. It was his last public appearance as sheriff of Whitmore County. The United States Department of Justice held its own press conference. This one was in Washington, D.C. Today we are announcing federal criminal charges against former Deputy Cade Langley of the Whitmore County Sheriff's Department. The charges, count 1, deprivation of civil rights under color of law. Langley had used his position to violate the constitutional rights of citizens based on their race. Count 2, perjury. He had lied under oath in the trial of Aria Vaughn, and the investigation revealed in at least other cases. Count 3, obstruction of justice. He had tampered with evidence, manipulated reports, and participated in efforts to suppress complaints. Count 4, evidence tampering. He had planted drugs in the vehicles of innocent people, then arrested them for crimes that never occurred. Maximum combined sentence in federal prison. The DOJ also announced that it had reached a consent decree with Whitmore County, a legally binding agreement requiring sweeping reforms to the Sheriff's Department, mandatory body cameras for all deputies with tamper-proof storage that uploaded directly to an independent server, independent oversight of all uses of force, all complaints, and all arrests involving minority citizens, a civilian review board with subpoena power, authority to compel testimony, and the ability to recommend termination. Complete restructuring of internal affairs, including the removal of Brooks's nephew, and the hiring of trained investigators from outside the department. The system that had protected Cade Langley was being torn down and rebuilt from the ground, and it was only the beginning. Judge Vanessa Lowe, the same judge who had dismissed the charges against Aria Vaughn, ordered a comprehensive review of every conviction in Whitmore County that relied on Cade Langley's testimony. The results were staggering. Cases were flagged for review. Convictions were vacated, thrown out entirely as unreliable. People were released from prison, human beings who had spent years locked up for crimes that never happened. Some had served, some had served. One man had been incarcerated. When he walked out of the prison gates, he fell to his knees and wept. His mother, who had visited him every month, stood beside him, crying too. "I told them," she kept saying. "I told them he didn't do it." No one listened. Now everyone was listening. Federal courthouse. After Aria Vaughn walked out of that county courtroom in FBI blue, Cade Langley walked into a different courtroom. This time he was the defendant. The trial lasted. The evidence was overwhelming. The prosecution played Aria's recording twice, frame by frame, moment by moment, showing exactly how Langley had planted the drugs. They called Nadia Reyes to the stand. She testified, describing stop after stop, lie after lie. They presented the statistical analysis, Black and Latino drivers arrested out of total. Igual, a pattern that couldn't be explained by coincidence. They called the victims. One by one, they took the stand and told their stories. Years of their lives stolen, families destroyed, all because one man with a badge decided they looked like the type. Langley's defense attorney tried everything. Equipment malfunction, bias in the investigation, a dedicated public servant being unfairly targeted. The jury wasn't buying it. They had seen the video. They had heard the testimony. They knew the truth. On the final day, Aria Elaine Vaughn took the witness stand. The prosecutor asked her, "Agent Vaughn, when Deputy Langley arrested you, you could have identified yourself immediately. Why didn't you?" Aria looked at the jury, then at Langley. "Because my job wasn't to save myself, it was to save the next person." He stopped. "And the one after that?" She paused. "If I had revealed myself on that roadside, he would have apologized. The department would have covered it up, and nothing would have changed. I needed him to lie under oath. I needed the system to hear it. I needed the world to see what the people of this county had been living with." Langley's couldn't meet her eyes. He stared at the table in front of him, jaw clenched, face red. The jury deliberated. They returned with a verdict: guilty on all 4 counts. Cade Langley stood before the judge for sentencing. "Mr. Langley," the judge said, "you swore an oath to protect and serve. Instead, you used your badge as a weapon against the very people you were supposed to protect. You planted evidence. You lied under oath. You destroyed innocent lives." The judge paused. "This court sentences you two in federal prison. No possibility of parole, and years." Cade Langley, who had spent putting innocent people in prison, would now experience what he had done to them. In the gallery, the men and women he had wrongfully convicted sat watching. Some were crying, some were nodding, some just stared, finally seeing the justice they had been denied for so long. Aria Vaughn was there too, in the back row, quiet, watching. When the verdict was read, she didn't smile, didn't celebrate. She just closed her notebook, stood up, and walked out. There was more work to do. Today, Whitmore County looks different. There's new leadership at the Sheriff's Department, new training, new accountability. Every deputy wears a tamper-proof body camera that uploads directly to an independent server. They can't turn it off. They can't delete the footage. Everything is recorded. Everything is stored. And a civilian oversight board reviews every complaint. The system that protected Cade Langley no longer exists, but the damage he caused hasn't disappeared. People had their convictions overturned, were released from prison. The county established a restitution fund, money that can never fully repay what was taken. One of the victims finished his college degree. He had started it before his arrest. Another reconnected with children she hadn't seen. They're rebuilding. Slowly. A third opened a small barber shop downtown. On the wall, he hung his certificate of exoneration so people know, he said, so they remember. Special Agent Aria Vaughn was promoted to Supervisory Special Agent in the FBI's Civil Rights Division. She continues to investigate police misconduct across the country. When asked about the Langley case, she doesn't talk about herself. She talks about the people he harmed and the ones she hopes to protect next. I think about them, she said in an interview. The people who didn't have proof. The ones who tried to tell the truth and no one believed them. That's who I do this for. If you drive down County Road 12, you won't see anything unusual. Just a stretch of rural road, fields on both sides, cars passing peacefully. But something happened here that changed everything. A man with a badge thought he could lie without consequences. He thought the system would protect him. He thought no one was watching. He was wrong. Because sometimes the truth doesn't disappear. It waits. And when it's ready, it speaks louder than any lie ever could. Across America, traffic stops remain one of the most common interactions between citizens and police. Studies show that black drivers are stopped at disproportionate rates and searched more often. Even when those searches find nothing, change happens when we document it, when we demand it, when we refuse to stay silent. Have you ever witnessed something wrong and felt powerless to speak up? What would you do if you had the evidence to prove the truth? If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment below. What does justice look like in your community? Subscribe for more stories that expose the truth and honor the people who fight for it. Thank you for watching. Pick them up now. His shoe tapped impatiently while she knelt to gather the papers. Her public defender remained silent, eyes averted. Remember your place, Voss sneered as he strutted back to his position of power. Talia's jaw tightened with quiet resolve. She gripped her small notebook like a shield against her chest. Inside its pages lay the evidence that would obliterate Voss's career within hours. The gavel slammed down with a deafening crack that echoed through the silent courtroom. You're nothing but a troublemaker from the projects. Look at me when I'm sentencing you, Judge Harlan Voss barked, his voice thick with contempt. 17-year-old Talia Brooks stood frozen before him, her heart pounding as the all-white courtroom audience snickered. Judge Voss descended from his bench, invading her personal space. He snatched her court documents and let them scatter across the floor. Dawn broke over the county courthouse as Talia adjusted her modest blue blouse, the nicest one she owned. Her father, Terrence, walked beside her, his maintenance uniform freshly pressed. They couldn't afford to miss work, but they couldn't afford a private attorney either. "Remember what I told you?" Terrence whispered gently. "Stand straight. Speak clearly. Look them in the eye." Talia nodded, clutching her notebook filled with pages of careful observations she had been preparing for weeks. Community service beats juvenile detention.
Okay.
Across town, Judge Harlan Voss adjusted his silk tie in the mirror of his Westlake mansion. His wife placed his coffee precisely where he expected it. "Juvenile cases today," he complained, checking his Rolex. "Delinquents wasting the court's time. There's one about trespassing at the Grand Hotel." He pulled out his phone and speed-dialed Victor Langford. "About that trespasser at your hotel, don't worry, I'll make an example of them." Their assigned public defender, Mr. Fletcher, met them in the hallway. He shuffled through his overflowing case files until he found Talia's paperwork. "Brooks, Talia Brooks, right. The hotel trespassing case. You're in Judge Voss's courtroom today. Look, you should take the plea deal. First offense. Well, technically second if we count that park incident." Talia began to protest, but Fletcher cut her off. "Voss is tough on folks like you. Take the deal." Talia's hand moved quickly across her notebook page. Her observations grew more detailed with each case. When the bailiff called Brooks, Talia, a sharp-eyed woman in the back row, sat forward, her attention locked on Judge Voss. Talia approached the defendant's table with steps measured and deliberate. Back at the courthouse, Talia sat quietly observing the proceedings before her case. A white teenager caught shoplifting received a stern warning and 20 hours of community service. Another white defendant with vandalism charges got a reduced fine after his father spoke to the judge. Then a black teenager appeared, charged with loitering. Voss's demeanor transformed instantly. His voice became cold and condescending as he handed down the maximum community service and a substantial fine. "I was studying," Talia said quietly. "The lights at home went out again. The park has benches under streetlights." Voss's eyebrows rose. "Did I ask you to speak? Mr. Fletcher, control your client." The prosecutor stood, straightening his tie. "Your Honor, the defendant was discovered in a restricted area of the Grand Hotel, specifically near the executive conference rooms where valuable equipment is stored. Security footage confirms she had no legitimate business there. What do you have to say for yourself?" Voss addressed Talia directly now, leaning forward. "I was there for a program," she began. "A program?" Voss scoffed. Judge Voss barely looked up from his papers, a dismissive frown forming at the corners of his mouth. "Another trespassing case," he sighed dramatically. "Seems to be an epidemic of young people thinking they can go wherever they please." Mr. Fletcher cleared his throat. "Your Honor, my client is a first-time offender in this context. We're prepared to discuss a reasonable penalty." "Second-time offender," Voss interrupted, tapping a folder. "I see a prior incident at Westside Park after hours. Can't have people thinking they can walk into establishments where they don't belong. The Grand Hotel doesn't run programs for—" He stopped himself, but his implication hung in the air. Mr. Fletcher interjected weakly, "Your Honor, perhaps a fine and standard community service would—" "Mr. Fletcher, this court takes trespassing in upscale establishments seriously," Voss snapped. "It begins with trespassing, ends with theft." His gaze slid over Talia's neat but modest clothing. The defendant has already shown a pattern of being where she doesn't belong. The bailiff took it to Voss, who flipped through the pages with growing irritation. His mocking smile faltered when he saw detailed documentation of his courtroom patterns, complete with dates, quotes, and statistical notations. Voss's face tightened momentarily before his practiced judicial mask returned.
Declan.
"Stand up, Miss Brooks," Voss commanded. "Come to the center of the courtroom." Talia rose slowly, uncertainty in every movement. The courtroom watched as she stepped forward, standing alone on the cold marble floor. He snapped the notebook shut and tossed it back toward Talia with exaggerated disdain. "Quite the little researcher, aren't we?" he sneered. "Taking notes won't change the facts of your case." He leaned back, fingers steepled beneath his chin. "I've decided that a standard community service arrangement is insufficient here. Ms. Brooks clearly has an attitude problem that needs addressing." Fletcher started to object, but Voss silenced him with a raised hand. Talia's father shifted in his seat, knuckles white against his knees. A court officer stepped slightly closer to him, in warning. Throughout the exchange, Talia wrote steadily in her notebook. Voss noticed. "What are you writing?" he demanded suddenly. Talia looked up, startled. "Just notes, Your Honor." "Hand it over." Voss extended his palm. "This is my courtroom, not your classroom." Talia hesitated, then slowly passed her notebook forward. "And who exactly invited you to this mysterious program? The National Merit Scholarship?" Voss laughed, cutting her off. "The National Merit Scholarship Program doesn't meet in hotel conference rooms. They meet in schools, universities." He addressed the courtroom directly. "Creative? I'll give her that." Whispers rippled through the spectators. Talia stood perfectly still, her face a careful mask hiding the humiliation burning beneath. "Turn around, Miss Brooks," Voss instructed. "Let everyone see your idea of appropriate courtroom attire." Talia hesitated. "That wasn't a suggestion," Voss snapped. She turned slowly in a circle, her simple blue blouse and dark skirt modest and clean, if not expensive.
Missing.
"Absolutely not, Your Honor. Our conference center is exclusively for business clients and hotel events. Security reported the young woman near our Platinum Suite, where we keep valuable equipment." "Your Honor," Fletcher finally spoke up, "this is highly irregular and potentially—" "Mr. Fletcher, are you questioning my methods?" Voss's voice dropped dangerously. "Because I can hold you in contempt as easily as your client." Fletcher subsided immediately. Voss lifted his phone. "I have Victor Langford, owner of the Grand Hotel, on the line. Mr. Langford, was there any educational program scheduled in your conference rooms on Tuesday afternoon?" A tiny voice responded through the speaker. Throughout the exchange, the woman in the back row continued observing, her tablet now recording every word. Two well-dressed individuals slipped in beside her, conferring in hushed tones. Talia stood alone in the center of the courtroom, back straight despite the public humiliation. A single tear threatened at the corner of her eye, but she blinked it back fiercely. "Court will recess for 15 minutes, Voss announced abruptly. "Miss Brooks, don't leave the building. We're not finished with your case." The bailiff called for all to rise as Voss exited. The moment he was gone, whispers erupted throughout the courtroom. "Thank you, Mr. Langford," Voss concluded the call. "The court appreciates your time." He turned his attention back to Talia. "Still maintain you were there for a program?" "Yes, Your Honor," she answered, her voice steadier than before, defiant to the end. Voss sighed theatrically. Talia's phone buzzed in her pocket. She didn't reach for it. The screen flashed briefly with a message. "Hold steady. Justice incoming. You're not alone." Talia returned to her seat, face carefully composed despite the humiliation still burning in her chest. "I need to use the restroom," she whispered to her father. Terence nodded, concern etched in every line of his face. "You're handling this with more strength than I could," he said softly. "I'm proud of you."
Hartley.
Talia slipped away. finding refuge in the courthouse bathroom. Only there, in a locked stall, did she allow herself a moment of vulnerability. Silent tears streamed down her face as she gripped the edge of the sink, knuckles white with tension. She splashed cold water on her face, erasing the evidence of her tears. The bathroom door swung open. "Now," Voss continued, satisfaction creeping into his voice, "I want you to explain to everyone present why you thought you belonged in a five-star hotel like the Grand. What possible legitimate reason could you have?" "I was invited to," Talia began. "Speak up," Voss barked. "The court reporter can't hear your mumbling." Talia swallowed hard. "I was invited to participate in a program." "A